Welcome to this first episode of the Building Connections podcast series, in which we will have conversations around a variety of topics with leading professionals in our industry. With me, first guest today is Peter Ankerstern, Chief Strategy Officer at Planon. So we're actually colleagues because I'm working as a product strategist at Planon. But next to that, Peter, you are Chair of IFMA. Can you disclose a little bit of what IFMA is doing and what your role in this is today?
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thanks for having me on this podcast show. Really delighted to be your first guest. What an honor. It's just amazing. IFMA, I mean, you and I go way back in IFMA. We actually met through IFMA, so it's a great organization. We have 21,000 members now. We have more than 140 chapters around the world. We have councils and communities. And the whole purpose of IFMA is, of course, to bring the FM community together, to drive the professional development and to profile IFMA or FM as the profession of choice for both people that are working in the built environment, but also young people getting into the industry. So that's what we are trying to do. I've been a member since 2005 of IFMA. I joined the board of directors in 2016, and then I became the chair in 2020, and I've been the chair for 2 years now. Yeah,
that's an exception, by the way, isn't it?
It is.
Induced by COVID, huh?
Yeah. I think they felt sorry for me. So they asked if, being through COVID was just a tough time, of course, for the association. And we were very nervous about, losing members, losing sponsors, losing sort of the momentum we were having. But I have to say, I mean, like most other companies and organizations, we also pivoted. We changed the setup. We became very sort of conscious about cost containment, being very diligent in terms of how we spend our cost, and just making being prudent in the way we are managing the association. And I think we did well. We didn't lose too many members during COVID. We retained the vast majority of them. We didn't grow, but we didn't really lose members either. So we were very happy, sort of managing through the crisis. So it all turned out quite well, especially now that we are in the wake of the pandemic. So we can sort of look back at it and say, I think we made some of the right choices during the pandemic. So it's always good to look at that in hindsight.
Yeah, well, luckily enough, we're looking a little bit more to the bright side after in this COVID situation. I think it would be fair to say that we're also with IFMA, but also within any company, we're creating new connections or connections in a new way. Actually, digitally, look at this setup as we have today, which is a digital experience, of course, in full. In terms of building connections, going to the theme, I know you've been heading our efforts at Planon as well in repositioning what we're going to do that links up to developments in the marketplace as we see them developing. So could you explain a little bit what's behind the new positioning, behind the tagline, building connections, and how you see its relevance in the marketplace today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a long process. It's been a great process. We had a great team working on this, and we also worked together with our partner Schneider Electric, who were kind enough to lend us some of their experts in branding and communications. We came up with the notions of building connections when we were sort of looking into the position that Planon would take in the market and what was really important for our connection. And it's always, I think a lot of companies, especially here after COVID, are having some discussions about what is the purpose of the organization, and also what is the purpose of the workplace. We had similar conversations, of course, at Planon related to the brand and the positioning of the company. And then we said, the software that we are providing is what it really does is actually it builds these connections. When we need to make sure that when people are at the workplace, they are productive, they're efficient, they're safe, but also that they can connect to their colleagues, even sitting at home using an app, deciding whether you actually want to go to the workplace or not. And that social aspect we feel is incredibly important, and our software solution really supports that aspect of having people working together, deciding whether to go to the workplace or staying at home, and then connecting. So we thought that was a good avenue to go down, and then we came up with the notion around building connection, which has what we want, what we like. We think it has a wonderful duality, because it's about building connections, in the building. Sensors, meeting rooms, everything around the building, the setup and the technology that makes the building connect. But of course, the other side of the coin is also building connections. Getting people together, getting people to talk, building new sort of interpersonal relationships. And we really like that sort of soft side to the tagline, and the more sort of building related hard side to the tagline. And we felt that was very appropriate in terms of how we were positioning the Planon brand for the future.
Yeah, and it links up to basically our approach to the market in terms of software services, in terms of opening up to what kind of vendors might be out there that are interesting to clients and to the market to adopt their solutions, but connect them actually to the base processes of real estate and facility managers processes, of course. Now, moving this to IFMA, is IFMA's position. If we look on a global scale, what we've seen under, of course, accelerated by COVID, is a completely new kind of dynamic in location, in workplace settings, in dynamics, how organizations deal with that. Partly it's of course about the workplace, partly it's about building portfolios, but also kind of ownership decisions that organizations are going to make. So for that, this higher diversity basically also needs to be connected as well. So what's IFMA thinking on about this dynamic? What's its position today, looking at what's happening around workplace diversification?
No, I mean, for us, we see at IFMA, we see this as a big opportunity to not only leverage IFMA and also begin to look into new constituencies and new sort of target groups within the built environment arena. Yeah. Increasingly, we are talking to HR professionals, architects, IT people, and also, of course, corporate real estate people. And it seems that the whole sort of industry is coming together from different angles. I think, you can say a lot of bad things about COVID, of course, but there is also a silver lining to the whole COVID pandemic and the last 2 years of trials and tribulations being sort of in a COVID environment. But there is a silver lining to it, especially for facility professionals, because what the pandemic really did was to shine a light on the importance of the workplace, because it's and I think also your comment on building connections and connecting people, using the workplace as a hub of making these connections work is being increasingly understood and appreciated by the C-level and by other industry professionals outside the facility management arena. I think facility managers, of course, have understood this and appreciated this for a number of years, but now we are getting sort of new collaborative partners in HR, IT, and of course in the C-suite in general. And organizations are beginning to understand, how important the workplace is to create a cultural setting. Maybe not necessarily just using the workplace as a means of productivity where people need to come to work. Yeah. Because now we understand, and of course we also did that before COVID-19, but now it's just so abundantly clear for everybody that you need people at the workplace. Maybe not every day, but at least now and then, maybe once a week or a couple of times a week, or maybe just a couple of times a month. But you need them to connect, to create these interpersonal relationships. You need them to socialize. You need them to, be good friends, teach each other, be part of meetings, and all of a sudden, the nature and the design and the setup of the workplace changes. It becomes more of I said before, a hub, but a place where people sort of check in and where they meet each other. So designing the workplace and using the right level of technology to make people connect is incredibly important for the future successful organizations and really to get the best out of the workforce. Creating these lounge areas, creating technology that allows people to connect both virtually, but certainly also when they're at the workplace, and figuring out who else is at the workplace, who from my team is going to be working today. Should I go to the office or should I stay home? Is there a chance that I can randomly walk into my boss or into the HR office or something where I have an issue or something to discuss with them? And these things become just increasingly important. And there, the facility manager is right at the center. We are at facility management. We are driving that connectivity and that transformation that organizations are going through. And I think that's incredibly important, not only for the FM profession, but of course also for an organization like IFMA. And we're using that. If I can just finish, but we are using that. I can see you're jumping at a follow-up question, but of course we're using that in order to also create connections to other associations. We've had a long-standing connection with ASRAE. We have ISSA, the large cleaning corporation. We are looking into creating connections with professional bodies within HR. We created our own IT setup around beta and the IT community. We are also on the whole sustainability side, which is a completely other topic that we can probably dive into. But on the sustainability front, we have the Circularity Institute and also the UN now that we are connecting with. So the whole mindset around an ecosystem, both for businesses like Planon with all our partners, but definitely also for associations, becomes absolutely critical. And I'm a strong believer in the notion of it's maybe not the most effective company that wins, but it will be the companies with the most effective, or who is part of the most effective ecosystem that's going to win the market. Because and therefore also that whole notion about building connections, I think is absolutely vital, and it can be used in a much broader context than of course what we are doing at Planon. Yeah, well,
just going to the practical situations of facility managers and real estate managers on a daily basis, building connections. You just mentioned that the elements of connecting to HR and IT as a very important. I completely subscribe to that. At the same time, when I look at the practical situation in the daily work of real estate and facility managers, that seems still a challenge to really connect up and how to basically put that into a framework in your own organization in building those, connecting up to them, because it's going to be so much important. One of the cases that we're looking at Planon, for instance, is in this whole diversity of workplaces you just talked about, what is connecting the different locations, that's the digital workplace. And so a digital workplace is an IT game. It's an IT play, but it's going to be of great relevance to facility managers who basically, where we're going to connect them up in a kind of hybrid way, isn't it? The physical to the digital. So in terms of advice for individual real estate facility managers, what would you advise them to do in order to create this more firm connections with your peers in IT and HR on a daily basis? Is there any guidance you could provide in this, how to go about doing that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the critical aspects, and of course a lot of companies already have that, but I think there's also a lot of companies who don't have that, is to create a workplace strategy, is to really sit down and do that in a collaborative effort. So it's not only the HR team who should create that or the facilities team, but do that as a joint effort, bring the right people around the table and co-create that workplace strategy and figure out, what should our workplaces be like in the organization? What is it we want to do? What is the balance between remote working and people being at the workplace? Because we also have to recognize that there are people and there are certain geographies in the world where home working or telecommuting is maybe not the right choice, where especially younger generation will have a great benefit of coming more regularly to the workplace. If you're coming straight out of university, for example, you need, like we had when we grew up into the business, we had somebody we could sit next to, you could ask stupid questions to, somebody you could build up relationships with. So figuring out what is the balance of people coming to work, people not coming to work, or telecommuting, and what is the balance of the digital setup, and how do we connect with that? And then also the footprint. Where do we want to have our corporate offices, which, by the way, from a design perspective, is really also interesting to see, becomes really big brand statements and cultural statements of organizations. So I think the corporate head offices, or maybe even regional head offices, will probably grow in size. They will become even bigger and even more elaborate and even more sort of brand statements like the ones we have seen with Apple's head office in Cupertino or Nike's head office, that really emanates this is what this company stands for. Not only as a hub of people coming to work, but as a brand statement of what this organization also stands for in the community that they're part of. But then I think we'll see much more of the local offices turn into some kind of satellite offices, co-working facilities, flex offices, where people can check in and out based on where they are, because they're going to be largely based by home working or remote working. So the whole notion of going to the office is probably diminishing, and the whole notion of work can happen from the office environment, the home environment, but it can also happen for lounge areas and maybe co-working, office hoteling, lounge areas, flex offices, or those types of things. And that's all connected via the digital workplace. And that requires a workplace strategy that is carefully thought through, and where you connect the dots between FM, HR, IT, corporate real estate. Because I guarantee you, once you sit down and really have a fundamental discussion about this, I'm absolutely certain that you don't need the same footprint as you did before.
Right.
We can see that offices are being put back on the market, and companies are really looking at their portfolio of office of workplaces, whether they need to have the same size of portfolio, the same type of offices, or how they can sort of rethink that process. Yeah.
Well, the backdrop of this is, of course, digitization in a number of ways, and to that, I think, and we're very conscious of that, the growing importance of cybersecurity around anything that you do. All things that you put together need to be done in cybersecure ways. I think the developments in the world today in terms of hacking and so on, are a clear example of how this is going to be more and more important in the years to come, I guess. I want to move to connected buildings a little bit in a conversation, because that's another angle to it, of course. We are basically moving towards a world where we connect buildings for a number of reasons. I think one of the things I want just to touch on in this conversation with you today is, of course, the role of connected buildings in view of ESG, sustainability. I think in the current play of the world, the IPCC report just came out a few days or a few weeks ago. The second report was even more alarming than the first one. Connected buildings have an important role to play there, I guess. What's your perspective to that? How do you see this evolve? How do you see the contribution of the built environment in the grand play of ESG?
I mean, it's a fascinating time we are in. You have to say, we're drinking from the fire hose at the moment, all of us. I mean, COVID first, now the Ukrainian situation, and then the looming climate crisis we had, which the UN and the IPCC report. Very well documents now. I don't think there's any doubt whether this is something we need to take very, very seriously going forward. So I mean, these are really relevant topics for everybody, not only us in facilities management, but for everybody. I think facility managers are really key to some of the solutions on this. About 40% of CO2 emissions come from the built environment entirely. And we can do a lot of stuff. What's interesting from a planner point of view, and for any IWMS provider's point of view, is that if you cannot digitize the buildings that you are owning, if you cannot sort of understand, what is the footprint? What is happening? What is our energy consumption? What is our water consumption? How do we manage all the waste? What is the footprint? And how can you automate this? Because, I mean, we can put a lot of sensors in the building and get the data. And a lot of companies are already doing that today. But getting the data is, of course, a great start, but that doesn't move the dial at all. It just gives you that baseline, that understanding of what are we currently consuming and what is our impact on the environment, but then the next phase is far more interesting and far more relevant, because then it's actually doing something about it, and the whole notion of automation, of shutting down offices, HVAC system, lighting, don't clean it if nobody has been there. Is also part of that intelligent building, that it's all going to connect. You're going to connect to your service providers, your service provisions. You're going to automate the building components that you can do, and in order to drive it effectively and really reduce your footprint. Because I think we've been through the motion of changing to LED lights and taking some of the low-hanging fruits. But there's a lot to be done in this area, and a lot of things that we can do on a day-to-day level that just safeguards the environment and provides that opportunity to run our buildings in the most sustainable way without necessarily building new stuff. Because, I mean, it may be easier to implement some of these measures if you're constructing a new building or a new head office or whatever. But there's a lot to be done also in retrofitted buildings where you can do. But I think it all starts with just creating that understanding of where are you today? What is your energy consumption? What is your sustainability sort of footprint that you're leaving? And I think that's where it starts. And then you can, and I think that's probably also part of a workplace strategy to some extent, at least, to really understand, what is it we can do? Because I guarantee you, there are laws coming out around the bend right now. EU is coming on a big new building directives. in 2023. There are already requirements now on reporting, but and I know also the U.S. government in Washington is coming out with new laws and directives on how to manage and measure ESG. And then finally, I think you can see you got sustainably conscious investors now, so they are voting with their money. And then also in terms of recruiting the right employees, the younger generations, they want full transparency. They want to understand what your organization does and how it impacts the environment. And they're gonna decide their future employer on the basis on also the environmental footprint. And how well that is documented. They simply want to see that. So I think those are important aspects.
Right. Actually, how to deal with it, how to basically digitize buildings and how to make tangible solutions or do that, respond to that in tangible ways is a topic of a next Building Connections episode that I will be having with Bola Abisogan, and it's about digital twins. So this is a very tangible approach where the UK is really, I think, heading the pack in thinking, at least. So that will be something for a next episode. In terms of what's happening in the world today, when you look at the professional real estate facility management professional today, what we've been talking about today is a lot of challenges, a lot of new elements being put on the plate, and it might even seem a little bit overwhelming, of course. So, would you have any advice to real estate and facility managers in how to address this full picture and how to deal with it and on a daily basis? Would you have some advice for them? That's not easy, is it?
No, that's yeah. How can you come with advice when you don't really fully understand it yourself? So, but I don't know. I think it's manage what you can. I had an old boss when I was my first boss, one of my mentors when I was back starting my career at the ISS group. He always said to me, Peter, don't worry about things you can't influence or you can't control. Right. And that was a good advice that has stayed with me throughout my career. And I think that's probably, maybe not the advice you were looking for, but I think as sort of a human advice, I think it's a good advice because there are so many things at the moment that are beyond our control. Which business continuity plan would entail a crisis of the magnitude that we have seen with COVID-19.
Right.
These things are extremely difficult to predict, and so some of these things are going to impact us, some are not going to impact us. But maybe the other advice you could say is just how do you stay agile? How do you stay flexible? I think that's probably the headline today in today's business environment, is to say, whatever happens, you need to react to it in a very agile way. Again, if I can bring the Corona situation up, the fact that corporations pivoted and changed so quickly and moved their workforce into a digital environment is just unbelief. If you had said that to organizations and come with that prediction, say, hey, by the way, in 2 months, there's going to be a global pandemic and everybody's going to work from home. 90% of the workforce is going to work from home. People would have said you were crazy because we couldn't do that. That wouldn't be possible, right? But it was possible and it happened. So maybe, not overanalyzing, not worrying too much about the situation that is at hand at the moment, at least the things that you can control. And then those you can control, then be sure that you have a flexible and agile setup, that you are able to adapt and pivot your entire setup according to what happens in the world around you. I guess those are probably the best advice.
Well, it sounds very sound advice, very practical. So that's good. I think perhaps to add to it.
Yeah.
Look for people to work together with. So alliances within the organization. Make sure that you basically can position yourself to the strategic direction of the company. I think with the HR, IT people, I think that's a natural alliance. And to my own perspective, prioritize the problems that you can solve and do them one by one in a very practical way. So it's basically the same as you said, is just to make sure that you're busy around the things that you can change, and and basically try to influence the things that you cannot change. But your fate is in the hand of God. I would say then. Probably, Okay.
Yeah, but listen, Eric, you're a much older and much wiser man than I am. So I think it's more appropriate that you come up with these types of advices than I do.
Well, I'm older, but perhaps not wiser. I'm not sure, but we all struggle and do our best in terms of what we can do to help the situation around. Peter, it has been a great conversation. Thank you very much for your insights and sharing the position of IFMA around a number of topics as we discussed today. To all you who have been listening in, thank you very much for being with us today. And we're looking to see you again in the next episode of Building Connections. Thank you.